What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Nightmares Podcast, where we talk about all things horror, movies, music, video games, comic books, whatever the fuck we decide we want to talk about, we talk about. I am here with Zach the Z-Man, Scary Man. I don't have a fucking nickname for you.
You suck at those.
I don't...
Also, where's your flight attendant voice? You gotta introduce us, Welcome to the Nightmares Podcast,
This is a Minicast, Zach. We don't have time
We don't have time for your bullshit. Anyway,
Oh.
I'm also with here over at the booth with Brandon and Colin.
Hello.
Awesome. So we are doing a quick mini cast. We're going to discuss our favorite horror movie intros or opening scenes, whatever we want to talk about, and then more importantly, why? Why do we like them so much? So that being said, I am going to, because he pissed me off because he was giving me a hard time about my nicknames. Zach, you get to go first.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Make me. All right. My favorite horror movie intro is I would have to say Freddy versus Jason.
Oh, that's a good one, actually. That's
Yeah.
a really good one.
That's funny because that was actually on my short list of ones for me to choose from.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm kind of
Like-
curious to know what your reasons are.
So I remember that one just being because I remember going to see that movie. That was one of the first big horror movies I saw in theaters. And I was just like, because it starts out, because I would say that's more of a Freddy movie than it is a Jason movie.
Despite the fact that Freddy gets one kill.
Fucking exactly. Yeah, and it was just like, he starts off, and Robert Englund form and everything like that. He kills the kid, and then after the parents murder him in the fucking boiler room or whatever, it goes through all of his some of the most popular kills that he's done, and that's one thing that I used to love about Freddy growing up was he had some of the most creative and just brutal and weird outlandish kills, but they looked good, they were awesome, and they were fucking terrifying. So it's like, yeah, I love that. And then you get Jason's little intro where it's just this kills a chick on a fucking dock and just impales her into a fucking tree. And also, it was just a very special movie for me because that was also the first big crossover movie I remember. You got the Universal Monster movies, but
Same
whatever.
here.
Yeah,
That's a generations before us.
exactly. This was Freddy versus fucking Jason.
Yep.
Oh my god, it was just such a big moment for me, and just holy shit, this is really fucking happening.
Yeah.
And to see it live on the big screen was just fuck yeah.
Yeah, because that one always stuck in my mind too. And for the most part, it really is just a recap.
It is.
But when you think about it, Jason Goes to Hell was what, 93, I think it was?
No?
Yes, 93.
Was it?
Yeah,
It was early 90s, and
early
Freddy's
90s.
Dead was 91. I know that.
Yeah, it was 93.
Yeah.
So it had been 12 years since a real Freddy movie, and
2 years since Jason X.
we had Jason X, but Jason X is kind of its own. It's not its own thing, but it's a very different experience from what came before it.
It's in the future.
And of course, there was also Wes Craven's New Nightmare, but that's not in the timeline.
It is in the timeline, but it isn't.
Yeah, that's also
Yeah.
kind of its own thing. It's not Jason X is not a traditional Friday the 13th. New Nightmare is not a traditional Nightmare on Elm Street. And anyway, so it had been 10 plus years for each series since we actually got a true movie for them. So, and I don't know what the box office for Jason X was like. I just don't remember.
It wasn't good.
So
I couldn't tell you.
if it wasn't good, so pretty much that movie had to deal with recapping and getting people back into the mindset of these movies after years.
Damn near 10.
And I think the way it's just starting on that close-up of Freddy's eyes was the detail in the makeup and the delivery of his recap, and of course the Jason kill. It really does just bring you up to speed. To a point where just you almost don't even need to see any of the previous movies. You'll of course get a lot more out of Freddy vs. Jason if you have.
Yeah.
But if you go in cold, if that is your first movie for either of them, you're brought up to speed.
True, and it wasn't dragged out either. It was very
No.
efficient
Yeah.
in what it did. It was very to the point. Here's what's going on, and also too Robert Englund actually narrating the whole thing was fucking great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They put you right there.
It's a very powerful and well done intro, and I absolutely love it.
Yep. All right, Mark, what's yours?
I was thinking about this. Of course, I would like to, do Jaws or do Scream. I don't really give a shit what you guys say. Yeah, it is a basic answer, but there's a reason why, because they're both fucking fantastic. But, I was thinking about this. I'm like, what actually made the biggest impact on you, growing up, and, what really sticks in your mind, and what, to turn you into a mindset. And you can have arguments about whether it's a thriller and everything else or horror, but there's fantasy elements, science fiction elements. It's mostly science fiction, but the opening to Jurassic Park actually had a huge impact to me, horror-wise and thriller-wise, growing up. I mean, that's the movie that made me actually want to act. I actually, it was funny, I was actually smart enough to realize, I would pretend to be in Jurassic Park. I'm like, I want to be in Jurassic Park. I was like, oh, wait a minute. No, if I was actually in Jurassic Park, I could die. But I think what I want to do is I want to pretend that I'm in Jurassic Park. And my dad was like, yeah, that's called acting, son. It was the first time anybody ever told me what that was. But it was that specific opening scene that's done so fucking well. People just watching this giant container, and they don't even know what the fuck is in the container. They just know something horrifying is in that container. And, and the whole, the keymaster pulling it up, and then you just see that raptor run right at the fucking wall, and the dude just drops in, and you're like, whatever you guys were planning, this wasn't it. This wasn't, things did not go according to plan in this scenario, and it's a really horrifying and almost to a realistic standpoint perspective. This is the kind of the fucked up thing that would happen if you were actually trying to open up a theme park or a zoo with deadly animals. This is an accident that could actually happen in this world that you've created. And it just, when I saw this when I was 8, and it just put me in that moment. And that, I think, led to, meeting you guys and then, starting out as a passive horror fan, and then, becoming what I am today, when it comes to how I feel about horror. It started me out in that whole thing. But just as a quality of an opening scene, it tells you everything you need to know about what you're in store for. Very similar to how Jaws is, you know what you're in for. This is exactly what this movie is going to be. And it just puts you in that perspective. And, watching that dude get dragged the fuck up the wall, was something. And there isn't a lot of blood in that, if no blood whatsoever, but it puts you in the mindset, and it is pretty horrifying of a situation, especially when you're watching it as an 8-year-old. It's really quite something. But it's also Steven Spielberg. He gets you in that mode. He gets you in that, and he has no problem with using horror to get his point across. He isn't a horror director, but he gets his fucking point across by using horror. I know that I'm not the only one that's a fan of that movie. It's a great movie. And it has a lot of great thriller horror elements, and that's definitely one of my favorites. Of course, Scream, Jaws is great, but that's the one that had the biggest impact on me growing up, and that's the one that I'll probably always remember.
Yep. I'll always remember that opening too, especially what's his face continuously shouting "Shooter!"
Yeah. Is one of my favorite characters. Really sucked when he got killed.
Muldoon.
Thank you, Colin. I was totally blanking on his name.
Just literally, they're all fast-ended, and he just walks up up the stairs. They should all be eliminated.
Right.
They should all fucking die. They're demons. That movie as a whole is, the horror elements and the horror backbone that's in it. It just works.
The dinosaurs aren't even in the film for that long at all. Maybe under 10 minutes of screen time, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny how
it's kind of like Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs. He's in that movie a lot less than you think.
Same thing with Jaws. They created that fucking shark with barrels.
And that was largely part because
it didn't work.
They couldn't show more. That's kind of a whole other topic, but kind of the double-edged sword of CG today, where it's you can show everything. So some people do, and that's usually when you get schlock.
# Sky Sharks.
Yeah.
No, there's other reasons for that movie not being good, but we're not here to talk about that.
All right, I guess it's my turn?
Yep.
All right. My pick is The Ring. 2002.
All right. Yeah. No.
It's not a bad one.
Yeah,
No, I know. I'll give you that.
That's one intro that just brings you up to speed on what the movie's about. It gives you the information in a way that's realistic because it's like that is a very everything on the internet movie. Internet existed, of course, but it's of course a completely different era than we're in now, where it's just like memes are shared in the course of how long does it take for a meme to get around? So The Ring just very much has that feeling, just like back when everything was like kind of secondhand knowledge, where it's like, oh yeah, I heard this urban legend from a friend who heard it from their friend who heard it from their friend, because like they're talking about the killer videotape, and of course the one girl had watched the videotape, and it's of course her 7th day, and it ends with, you know, a brief glimpse at what you're going to get later on in the movie. But yeah, it just set up the tone so well, and it's almost like its own little mini movie on its own. Like you can just cut off the rest of the movie, have that intro, and you got an excellent short film.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And yeah, just something about that whole secondhand urban legend thing has just always felt real to me.
Which I think is one of the reasons why creepypasta is so popular.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, is it true or not? And that's what's intriguing.
Yeah, and you know what? And also, too, I think more importantly is, and I just didn't think about this really until just now, but like if you really think about it, The Ring was like this last gasp of air when it came before the internet and digital age. I mean, it was the last kind of round of the blockbuster age and the VHS age, and like, you know, that ritual of going to the blockbuster and picking up the VHS. You know, DVDs were out, but they weren't quite, you know, they weren't really that popular. It was at the height of its power, but right at the end of its reign.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and that was the interesting part about all this is it was the last breath of that. Basically, all of that. It's the last breath of the VHS. It's the last gasp breath of the home video experience of getting the VHS. The last gasp of, you know, information being shared secondhand and through multiple people. It was the last time that was ever really a thing, and then the internet kind of, you know, blew up. I mean, it was the end. It really was the end of that whole time period.
And and kudos to the two actresses in that scene too, because let's face it, their job in that movie is to basically give us exposition.
Yeah.
In the hands of lesser actors, it could have been just very hammy, but it's like I said, everything felt real. They felt like teenage girls, one of them spending the night at the other's house, talking about this urban legend. Night ends badly. And it just I've always loved that intro. I think it is a perfect intro for a horror movie.
Sorry. To piggyback off what you were saying, Mark, can I mention other YouTube channels?
Sure.
So
of course.
There's one YouTube channel I like called Fanboy Flicks. It's called Weird Movies with Mark now, but he did a recap of the latest, I think, Rings.
Yep.
Or the remake, whatever.
That's the one with the plane,
it's a sequel at the beginning. Yeah.
And so he was talking basically just what you said was like there's something creepy about a cursed videotape or a cursed reel of footage. But a digital file, no. And so it loses that, I guess you could call it a gimmick, but not really a gimmick, it's part of the story.
Yeah.
But there's that mysterious things, like it's something physical and that you can destroy. Whereas like a digital file, it's just memory.
Yeah.
It doesn't really exist.
Holding the cursed videotape in your hands would definitely have more weight on how you feel. Like if you're that character actually holding that tape, you're probably more into the whole, okay, is this real?
Yeah.
Is this not? And then you watch it, but then of course it's just like somebody sends you an email attachment.
Just don't open it.
Don't open. Dude, it's like if the Necronomicon.
I don't even open attachments that I need to.
Yeah, dude, it's like if the Necronomicon was on a Kindle. It just really
Don't
wouldn't
give
have
them
the
that
like.
idea, Mark.
Sorry, but it just wouldn't have that fucking effect to it. Like, you know, it would just you go, what the hell is this? like your little kid handing you a tablet, you're like, ah!
You
turn
just
off.
digitized the Necronomicon.
Yeah,
What the fuck?
Dude, you ask your 5-year-old where they learned Latin. It removes that space. And by the way, like speaking of that, and by the way, that's one of the biggest reasons why I think, and its problem has been so over fucking parodied, but why the opening of Scream works so fucking well is because they were adapting technology that was so generation specific at that time as a mixture of landline and also too, like, you had a wireless home phone. She was literally running from window to window. You couldn't do that. Like you couldn't do that. She was self-contained within the home,
Right.
but she was still mobile. That's a very specific, like, and we all know that time. Where you're not courted, but you can't. You got to stay in the radius of the house.
So what you're saying is you want us to remake Scream, but in the 1970s with rotary phones.
No, because that's
good.
pretty much when a stranger calls. But and then using a cell phone, that dude could be anywhere. Like, and it's almost like a new technology versus old technology, but they were both existing at the same time.
And they did kind of bring that into Scream 2 a little bit, because wasn't Randy on a cell phone during his?
Yes,
set?
he was. I mean, but it was that whole thing of especially that when we're talking about opening scenes, it's the new technology and the old technology kind of duking it out in this whole scenario. But again, though, that's very time specific. It's very generation specific. It's very in that field. Same with The Ring.
Yeah.
Like,
the Ring came out 5 years after DVD, because DVDs came out in 97.
Yep.
The Ring was 02. The Ring-U, the Japanese original, was 98. But yeah, so 2002, 5 years into DVD. DVD is not even mentioned in the movie. It's all about that VHS tape. Man.
Absolutely. And which, by the way, is a perfectly appropriate conversation in 2002. Like,
Yeah.
like people still had the VHSs at that time. So you have a real specific point of it. But that being said, I don't want to get too deep in it because I want to hear Colin's one. I definitely want to hear his thing on this.
So it may have been hinted by what I'm wearing, and I don't know if it's a cheat or not, but I'm going to go with Ghostbusters.
That's a good.
I'll
fucker.
accept it.
That's a good opening scene, actually.
Because
that's a really good
also,
opening.
like, kind of opposite of, really what an intro should do is kind of tell you what you're going in for. It does that, but in a different kind of way, because if I remember correctly, there's no dialogue at all. It's just a librarian doing her job and screaming. You don't even see the ghost.
Yep.
And then it just cuts to Venkman being a dick.
Yeah.
And so I guess if you include that part, it's like, okay, something scary and then punchline kind of thing. But it's done so seriously, and it's like you would be scared if you were in her position too. You're just going about, you don't know what's
Shit
going
is
on.
flying behind her and everything else.
Right. And again, you don't see the monster, you see it later.
Yeah.
But even that part is funny too, because like, oh, just a nice old lady. Go get her,
Get
Ray.
her!
Get her.
Get her, Ray? Is that what you got?
Yeah, it's like, go get her, Ray.
This isn't like that time when you try to drill,
Right,
take a drill in your own
the
head.
drill hole
That
in
would have
his-
worked if you wouldn't have stopped me.
So I think that's just such a memorable opening scene, especially, I mean, I guess the common thing is just the cold open.
Yeah.
There are a lot of movies that kind of start with the credits, maybe establishing shots and everything, but no, this goes right into it, and you don't know what's going on, and so it's just a nice way they set up the fundamental horror of ghosts, but then the busting aspect is what makes it so charming and just unforgettable.
I think
Even though the ratio is definitely more geared towards comedy for Ghostbusters.
Well, yeah,
Ghostbusters
especially
really,
given the cast are all Second City people.
Ghostbusters to me is really one of the perfect horror comedies.
Yeah.
Oh, it's up there, and I think too from the standpoint of a lot of successful successful comedies and then even some successful dramas, the when you do the inverse,
Right.
you get a lot of success. Really really successful, because Ghostbusters, it starts out as a horror movie, and then like an audience is like, oh well, it's going to be this movie, and then immediately goes into them busting each other's balls, and you're like, oh well, it's that kind of movie.
Yeah.
I've seen it done effectively there, and the most effective I've ever seen it was in Guardians of the Galaxy. Because I saw the air get sucked out of an audience so quickly. Literally the whole audience is all laughing and having a good time, and then that fucking opening scene comes up with the mom in the hospital who has cancer, and then just the whole air just gets sucked out of the fucking room, and you can hear a pin drop.
But didn't that happen first?
Yes, it did. That's the opening scene.
Right? Yeah.
That's the opening scene, but that, to me, that opening scene made the movie. It made the laughs better. It made all those emotions that you felt in that opening scene gave legitimacy to the character. So when he's fucking singing and acting like an idiot, and singing into a reptile,
right?
You go, oh, I actually like this guy, because you've already had an emotional establishment with them. And when you do the opposite of what the movie is, expecting it to do, when you have a wacky comedy with, Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis and Bill Murray, and you go, oh, I'm in for that, but then you started out with, something scary.
Right.
You've now set a tone that keeps the audience on their toes, and it makes it much
kind
more
of
enjoyable.
calibrates the audience to, or over calibrates to the movie's benefit, in the sense that, like, you start with such a sad scene like Guardians, and it's like your mind, people want to feel comfortable, equilibrium. They don't want to be sad or all the time. So when you have such a downer, you want to laugh.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
it basically, just like you said, like a vacuum, what happens when you open the door, you get air coming in. And that's what it was.
Exactly. And I think that's, what, opening scenes are, especially in any genre, but especially in horror, if you don't want to establish it right away, whatever, you're going for in this movie, it's going to be hard to fucking catch up.
That's I'll kind of make this my last point before we go into final thoughts here. So this will kind of be my final thought. But what you just said reminds me of a movie called Late Phases. It's a werewolf movie that came out in like 2014 about this blind veteran who moves into a retirement community. A werewolf kills his dog, and pretty much the movie is like him taking the whole next month before the next full moon to get his revenge on the werewolf.
Wow.
Excellent movie. And I was listening to the director's commentary once, and the movie begins on the main character at his wife's grave. And he said originally, in the original script, the screenplay began with a werewolf attack to set up that it's the standard horror movie opening. But then the director's like, this werewolf attack at the beginning has really nothing to do with anything else in the movie. The scene did what it was supposed to do. It got the investors' attention, and now the movie's getting made. But for what the movie needs to be, thematically, the correct thing to do is to begin on the main character at his wife's grave. So it's interesting how that movie begins with a dramatic intro, and then it really doesn't introduce the horror element until quite a bit later in.
True. Final girl, Zach.
Yeah, true.
How that whole thing begins.
The intro of that one was actually the fake trailer for.
That's true too. But what immediately followed
Yeah.
Before even the final girl, the actual logo
Yeah.
shows up, title of the movie shows up. Everything that happened then was a very effective way to introduce the main character. And
Did you
make
say?
feel for
Sorry, I just want to make sure. Did you say final phase? I said late phases.
Late Phases,
Yeah.
also known as Night of the Wolf. Yeah, 2014. Excellent movie.
Oh, I see. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Zach, final thoughts?
Squirrels.
Hey, what else is new? The guys.
That was my final thought. So
Fair enough. Colin.
I'll just reiterate that. Yeah, I think sometimes intros can be overlooked, and similar to how the ending of a film does matter. They can be bookends. You can have a whole bunch of things happening in the beginning, but I think actually the beginning is you could argue is the most important part of the film, because if you don't get people to give them a reason to watch it, then they're not going to watch it. And if you, similar to, I'm not going to go down too far, but like similar with the modern trailers, I don't like the ones that basically give you synopsis of the whole thing. And it's just like, okay, then why do I watch the film? I just saw a 2-minute version of it. So I like the ones where it's like, it gives you just a taste, and then, a little sample. And then, you don't have Baskin Robbins give you full pint-sized samples of ice cream for free. So, yeah, I'll just say that I think intros are very important and sometimes overlooked.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree. I think that if you don't have a good intro, you're going to be working the entire movie to try to get the audience to give a shit. So that's one of the most important things. So,
All right. Ready for me to take us out?
yeah, take us out.
All right. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Nightmares Podcast. Do you have a favorite horror movie intro? Let us know in the comments. You can also check out all of our earlier podcasts wherever podcasts are available. And also be sure to check us out on all of our social media at Midwest Horror Network on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and
Slasher.
And of course, if you are listening to this on Spotify, make sure you press that little follow button so you'll be notified every time we drop a new Nightmares podcast. Also, too, if you are watching this on YouTube, if you could be so awesome to stab that like button, smash that subscribe, and click that little dingy bell to be notified every time we drop amazing content right here on MHN. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time on the Nightmares podcast.